Did you know that one mistake could cost millions of lives? In this story, the USA decided the fate of the war in just a few days. If you're interested in the truth about World War II, subscribe and hit the like button. There are many shocking facts ahead. December 6, 1942, RAF, Chelveston, England. Imagine stepping into the icy morning stillness, where every window pane, railing, and patch of tarmac glitters under a sheath of frost. The air bites with the sting of an English winter. Inside the briefing room, a man stands motionless before a sprawling map, Colonel Curtis LeMay. His presence dominates the space, not with volume, but with intensity. The unlit cigar clenched between his teeth is almost a signature, his thinking talisman. In just 3 hours, 18 B-17 flying fortresses of LeMay's 305th Bombardment Group would take to the skies. But today's objective was not just the rail yards of Lille, France. No, today's true mission was more audacious. It was an idea, an experiment, a gamble, a bomber formation so tightly knit, so mathematically aligned that it would redraw the rules of air warfare. The crews, huddled in that frosty hangar, hadn't been told yet. But history was about to pivot. Soon, Luftwaffe pilots would coin a nickname for this deadly new tactic: Fliegendes Stachelschwein, the flying porcupine. The image says it all, a skybound beast, bristling with so many guns it seemed suicide to touch it, and indeed to attack it was to fly into a buzzsaw. The calculation was terrifyingly elegant. One B-17G bristled with 13 50 caliber machine guns. Multiply that by 54 bombers flying in perfect harmony within a combat wing formation, and a single German fighter pilot now faced a sky lit by over 700 heavy caliber barrels, each capable of firing 750 rounds per minute, with an effective kill zone stretching 3,500 feet. A single mistake could shred him before he even pulled the trigger. This was the combat box, and its conception would shift the U.S. daylight bombing strategy from reckless hope to relentless force. It became the beating heart of America's offensive against the Nazi war machine. But this path had not begun with confidence. It had begun with a near stumble. August 17th, 1942, the first step picture. A different morning. The same war, the same stakes, but a different tone. On that day, the 8th Air Force carried out its maiden bombing mission from English soil. The target, the marshalling yards at Rouen-Sotteville, France. The bombers' 12 B-17E flying fortresses roared over the channel, escorted by the sleek guardians of the RAF, Spitfires. But these formations? They were loose 6 aircraft per squadron, spread across miles of airspace, 2 to 4 miles between squadrons. Why so much distance? Not strategy, not defense, but inexperience. The top brass knew their young crews were still learning how to fly, let alone fight. Each squadron flew in a vertical column with bombers staggered at 3 altitudes, spaced roughly 150 feet from top to bottom. It was a formation designed not for battle, but to avoid collisions. That day, luck was with them. All aircraft made it back, and only 2 showed any scars, minor flak damage. But commanders understood the truth. This shallow raid into occupied France was only a training run. The real war waited further east. Germany's industrial core, its factories, refineries, and machine works lay hundreds of miles deeper inside enemy territory, far beyond the protective umbrella of any Allied escort fighter of the time. If bombers were to strike there, they would have to fight their way in and out alone. And so the challenge was laid bare. A doctrinal gamble. Bombers alone. The blueprint of American air strategy was both visionary and perilous. precision daylight bombing. The targets were not vague cities. They were the arteries of Hitler's war machine, factories producing aircraft parts, ball bearings, synthetic fuel, steel. Pinpoint accuracy was the demand. But reaching those vital sites meant venturing through a gauntlet enemy skies thick with flak and swarming with German fighters. From airfields in East Anglia to cities deep in central Germany lay over 500 miles of hostile air each way. And at the cruising speed of a B-17, 180 miles per hour, this translated into missions that lasted 8 to 10 grueling hours. Imagine spending an entire working day encased in metal at 25,000 to 30,000 feet, where the air is so thin you need bottled oxygen just to stay conscious, and where temperatures plummet to 40 degrees below zero. The cold doesn't just sting, it numbs the soul. Yet the aircraft itself was no fragile bird. The B-17E, which led those early missions, was a leap forward in aerial defense. It carried 9 .50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns, a fortress in the sky. 2 guns were mounted in a top turret just behind the cockpit. 2 more in a belly turret, the revolutionary Sperry ball turret, a glass and metal globe that rotated 360 degrees, granting its lone gunner a full sphere of death-dealing coverage. The engineers had given the crews a weapon of astonishing power. Now, the challenge was turning that weapon into a system, a coordinated, living formation of steel, fire, and precision. And that's where Colonel LeMay came in. On that frigid December morning, as he gazed at the mission map, perhaps he wasn't thinking about history or tactics or even victory. Perhaps he was simply asking the question that defined the bomber war. Can they survive long enough to win? And with the birth of the combat box, America's answer began to take shape. One roaring engine, one locked formation, one freezing mission at a time. Close your eyes and place yourself inside the cold, humming belly of a B-17 flying fortress, thousands of feet above enemy territory. Now ask yourself, what would it feel like to hold your ground as metal screamed past your ears, your gloved fingers frozen, your body vibrating with the rhythm of war? The fortress earned its name not from its armor alone, but from the forest of firepower it carried. 2 .50 caliber Browning machine guns guarded the tail, manually operated, but absolutely vital. They were the last line of defense against a chasing fighter. The radio operator had his own station-mounted weapon, while waist gunners, one on each side of the rear fuselage, stood guard over the bomber's flanks. Up front, a single flexible gun perched in the nose, offering modest coverage forward. Each Browning M2 was a beast in its own right. 64 pounds of hardened steel, 57 inches from barrel to butt, spitting 750 rounds per minute across a range of 3,500 feet, outranging even the Luftwaffe's early 20mm MGFF cannons. It wasn't just firepower, it was survival. But make no mistake, for the men behind those guns, this was not glory, it was endurance. Inside the beast, the gunner's ordeal. Now imagine being the smallest man on the crew. Why? Because that's who was chosen for the ball turret. He climbed feet first through a narrow hatch in the fuselage floor into a space scarcely 4 feet across. Curled up like a child in the womb, surrounded by glass, he sat alone beneath the bomber's belly, spinning, tracking, firing. There was no room for a parachute. If the bomber caught fire or began to spiral, his only chance of escape was to rotate the turret into alignment with the hatch, crawl back into the fuselage, retrieve his chute, and leap into the void, all while the plane possibly broke apart around him. And what of the waist gunners? They stood exposed at open ports along the fuselage sides, the cold at 25,000 feet, a merciless 40 degrees, the wind, a constant 150 miles per hour, howling through the thin walls. They wore bulky, electrically heated suits, but these often failed. And when they did, frostbite wasn't just likely, it was expected. Numb fingers, frozen feet, gun barrels stiff with ice. This was aerial combat in late 1942, a brutal ballet of man and machine, of steel and sky. But then came a moment, a revelation that would shake the very foundation of American bomber doctrine. A German ace and a shocking discovery enter Egon Meyer, Luftwaffe ace, commander of the 3rd Gruppe of Jagdgeschwader des Terror. In November 1942, Meyer identified something the Americans hadn't fully understood yet, a soft underbelly at the very front of the fortress. Look at the nose of the B-17. There, behind a dome of plexiglass, sat the bombardier and navigator vital crewmen, only lightly protected by 2 manually operated 50 caliber guns with narrow fields of fire forward. Just behind them, the cockpit. And there, seated side by side, the pilot and co-pilot. Eliminate them, and the aircraft was lost, regardless of how many other crew members survived. Meyer ran the numbers. A head-on assault would be suicidal for the unskilled, but devastatingly effective for the bold and precise. He would come in from the 12 o'clock position, level and direct, screaming straight toward the formation at full speed. On November 23, 1942, flying alongside wingman Georg Peter Eder, Meyer tested his theory. The result? His first B-17 kill using a frontal assault maneuver that, in mere weeks, would sweep through Luftwaffe squadrons like wildfire. By December, it was doctrine, 3 seconds to kill. Now think of this, 2 aircraft on a collision course, one flying at 180 miles up the other, a nimble FW-190 or BF-109 at over 320 The closing speed, a staggering 500 miles per hour or 730 feet per second. A German pilot had 3 seconds, no more, from the moment he pulled the trigger to when he had to peel away to avoid a catastrophic crash. 3 seconds. That's all it took to pepper a fortress's nose with 20-millimeter shells, to kill its pilot and co-pilot, to wreck its controls, and to watch it tumble in flames toward the earth. This was the nightmare scenario Curtis LeMay faced as winter settled over England in 1942. Curtis LeMay, the strategist of survival. LeMay was just 36 years old, but he already commanded the 305th Bombardment Group. He took the reins on June 2nd, 1942, and brought with him more than rank. He brought a reputation. In a decade of service, LeMay had quietly earned his place among the most skilled navigators in the entire Air Corps. His exploits had already bordered on legend. In August 1937, flying as navigator under Commander Caleb Haynes, LeMay successfully located the battleship USS Utah off the coast of California, despite being handed false coordinates by Navy brass. A year later, in May 1938, LeMay guided 3 B-17s across 620 nautical miles of open ocean to intercept the Italian ocean liner SS Rex, nearly 725 miles from the American coast. It was a feat that thrilled the press and proved the B-17's reach and his brilliance. By the time he took charge of the 305th, LeMay's philosophy was fully formed. He believed in 2 things with unshakable conviction. Bombing required stability. If you wanted to hit your target, you had to fly straight and level during the bomb run, no matter how fierce the flak, no matter how thick the fighter attacks. The Norden bomb sight, America's jewel of precision, demanded nothing less. Survival required unity. The tighter the formation, the more guns overlapped, the more mutual protection was forged. Scattered bombers were sitting ducks. but a tight box, a wall of fire. This was the storm LeMay was preparing to face, a storm of steel, of speed, of seconds. And in that storm, he would build a system that turned weakness into strength, vulnerability into fortress. It was not enough to build a formation on paper. It had to function in the storm of combat, where men screamed into radios, flak burst like thunderclaps around the wings, and enemy fighters flashed through the clouds like daggers. Precision in this chaos required more than just theory. It demanded instinct. That's why LeMay drilled his crews mercilessly until flying in formation became as automatic as breathing. Every adjustment, every bank, every throttle correction had to be instantaneous, unconscious. The difference between a well-aligned bomber and one slightly off course could mean the difference between surviving the mission or becoming a smoking crater in a French field. Crews began to internalize the rhythm of formation, flying like dancers locked in step. No wasted motion, no guessing, just execution. Maintaining this level of discipline was not just about pride, it was about life or death. A pilot flying the outer edge of a formation couldn't afford to drift. Turbulence from the bombers ahead, known as prop wash, hit the wings like invisible waves. 4 massive engines churned the air into chaos behind them, and flying through it felt like riding a bull in the sky. At 30,000 feet, every muscle had to fight for control, and all of it happened in the brutal, cold 40 degrees below zero with oxygen masks fogging, electrical wires crackling through heated suits, and steel vibrating underfoot. Still, the numbers were clear. Those who held their place had a fighting chance. Those who strayed were lost, and the Luftwaffe knew it. German fighters constantly probed for weakness in the formation, searching for bombers that lagged or broke position. Once isolated, a single B-17 became easy prey. Unable to cover all approach angles, its defensive fire now a fraction of what it had been in the group. In contrast, a bomber, embedded within the tight geometry of the wedge, was shielded from nearly every angle, if not by its own guns, then by the guns of its brothers. The success of these formations didn't go unnoticed. As early missions in early 1943 rolled on, Luftwaffe pilots began to report increased losses. They spoke of trying to break into the formations and finding themselves caught in crossfires hit before they could even line up a shot. Some formations were so dense with fire that attackers described them as metal storms, zones where bullets passed in every direction at once. It was not just a tactic. It was an airborne ecosystem of survival, designed and drilled by a man who never smiled in a briefing and never flinched in combat. LeMay had turned the American bomber force into a flying organism, one that could survive deep penetrations into enemy territory without escort, at least for a time. By mid-January 1943, the 21-plane wedge had become the new standard across the 8th Air Force. It wasn't just a configuration, it was doctrine. It was ritual. Pilots didn't just memorize their position, they became it. The bombers launched in waves, stacking up into the sky over East Anglia like tiers of steel, each aircraft locking into its slot like a key into a machine. Viewed from below, they were a procession of shadows passing across the frozen morning light. Viewed from above, they were an assertion of will and announcement that the skies over Europe were no longer uncontested. Pilots who flew in the lower tiers of the formation or who trailed behind other aircraft entered a world of constant turbulence. There was no relief. The B-17's controls were fully manual, no power assistance. Every movement of the yoke, Every press of the rudder pedals, every adjustment of the throttles demanded physical force. After 6 hours aloft at altitude, battling the jet wash and holding formation with iron discipline, most pilots couldn't feel their arms. Their muscles turned to stone, and yet they held the line. Early 1943 would prove whether it was all worth it. On January 27th, the 8th Air Force took a bold step and it launched its first raid into Germany itself, targeting the naval yards at Wilhelmshaven. A total of 53 B-17s and 20 B-24s were sent. Among them, the 305th Bomb Group flew in LeMay's tightly constructed combat box. As the formations crossed over the Frisian Islands, they were met by German fighters, fierce, fast, and as aggressive as ever. But something had changed. The concentration of defensive fire from the interlocked bombers didn't just offer protection, it repelled. Fighters were forced to disengage earlier, their attacks less accurate, their losses higher. By the end of the mission, only 3 bombers had been lost from the entire strike force, just over 4%, far below the punishing 20% casualty rates that would become common on longer, unescorted raids deeper into the Reich. But even amid that success, the vulnerability remained obvious. The nose of the bomber was still its softest point. The combat box formation provided lethal coverage from the flanks, from the top, from the rear, but the forward arc was still a deadly blind spot. The Luftwaffe adapted quickly. Through early 1943, German fighter squadrons perfected their frontal assault tactics. They positioned themselves ahead of the bomber stream, waiting. Then came the Ket waves of 3 or 4 aircraft flying in line abreast, streaking head-on toward the leading squadrons. At 1,000 yards, they opened fire 20mm cannons, 13mm machine guns, creating a wall of shells. The FW-190, in its later variants, carried 4 MG-151 20mm cannons and 2 MG-17 machine guns. At 500 yards, they fired a final burst and peeled off in violent evasive maneuvers. Some held fire until 300 yards or closer, knowing they had mere seconds but enough to aim straight into the cockpit. The Americans scrambled for answers. Various bomb groups began field modifications, installing manual 50 caliber guns in cheek mounts on both sides of the nose. This gave the bombardier and navigator a bit more bite-partial coverage of the blind zone ahead. But the fix was incomplete. The angles were narrow, the tracking limited. The real breakthrough came with the Bendix chin turret. Electrically powered, remotely operated, and mounted directly beneath the nose, it housed 2 50 caliber guns aimed through a reflector sight. Controlled by hand grips and electrically driven, the turret gave gunners the ability to sweep the entire forward hemisphere, the most vulnerable arc. By the summer of 1943, the next evolution in bomber design arrived, the B-17G. It would become the definitive version of the Flying Fortress. A beast of air warfare, it carried 13 50 caliber machine guns spread across 5 powered turrets and 4 manually operated positions, a fully enclosed bastion of firepower. 2 guns in the chin turret now provided the long-awaited answer to head-on attacks. Above them, 2 manually operated cheek guns gave additional coverage on either side of the nose. Just aft of the cockpit, the dorsal turret held 2 more guns, operated by the flight engineer scanning the skies above and to the flanks. Beneath the fuselage, the Sperry ball turret rotated freely, ready to meet fighters coming from below. Along the waist, 1 gun on each side defended the beam positions. Behind them, a flexible gun in the radio operator's compartment added backup coverage from above and behind. And at the very back, 2 guns in the tail turret stood sentry. These had the longest reach, with a deadly envelope stretching out over 1,000 yards straight behind the bomber. It was a sniper's perch, a final line of defense, and often the last sound a German pilot heard before going down in flames. Now, at last, the B-17 was what it was always meant to be, a self-defending weapons platform capable of firing in every direction. A crew of 10 ran the ship. The pilot served as commander-leader of both plane and crew. Beside him sat the co-pilot, managing engine performance, assisting with navigation, and ready to seize the controls if the worst happened. Every man had a role. Every station mattered, and the air war over Europe had just entered its most brutal and most disciplined phase. Inside the cockpit, each man had a precise role to play, and not a single position was redundant. The navigator, hunched over his charts and instruments, guided the crew across hostile skies, plotting headings, adjusting for wind drift, calculating fuel consumption, all without GPS, relying only on compass, stopwatch, and celestial navigation. The bombardier, seated just below him in the glass nose, became the aircraft's eyes during the final minutes of a mission. He operated the Norden bomb sight, a precision optical computer that required steady flight to calculate the bomb release point. Before and after the bomb run, he also controlled the chin turret, directing twin 50 caliber machine guns against incoming fighters. Behind them, the flight engineer managed the health of the aircraft. He monitored engine performance, watched fuel levels, kept track of hydraulic pressure and electrical systems, and manned the top turret, rotating to track enemy fighters from above. The radio operator, seated near the center of the fuselage, handled communications and operated the radio room gun if enemy aircraft approached from above or behind. Below the fuselage, the ball turret gunner crouched in isolation, encased in his sphere, tracking targets below. On either side of the fuselage, waist gunners stood at open windows, eyes scanning the skies, fingers on the triggers. At the very rear, the tail gunner lay prone, eyes fixed backward, watching the long approach path where enemy fighters often stalked their prey. He would lie there for hours, sometimes seeing the attack coming from miles away, knowing full well he would be the first and last line of defense. The Luftwaffe's answer to the fortress's growing firepower was equally relentless. German engineers studied wrecked B-17s and made a grim discovery. It took an average of 20 hits with 20mm cannon shells to bring down a bomber from the rear. And the math got worse. Gun camera analysis revealed that most Luftwaffe pilots hit their targets with only 2% of the rounds they fired. That meant an average pilot needed to fire 1,000 rounds of 20mm ammunition to guarantee 20 hits. But the early FW-190s carried only 500 rounds total. In simple terms, even if a pilot dumped his entire payload, he was unlikely to down a single B-17. The solution? Bigger guns. Later models of the Focke-Wulf 190 were bristling with firepower 4 or 6 MG-151 20mm cannons backed by 2 MG-131 30mm heavy machine guns. But even that wasn't enough for some. In desperation, the Luftwaffe began modifying aircraft with experimental heavy cannons. Some fighters carried the BK-37, a 37mm automatic cannon. Others flew with the MK-103, a fearsome 30mm weapon. Some specialized interceptors carried even larger armaments designed for one purpose: destroy a bomber with a single hit. These weapons could shatter a B-17 with 1 or 2 well-placed rounds, but they came at a cost. The added weight reduced speed and agility. Aiming became harder. Ammunition was limited. pilots became flying artillery pieces, powerful but lumbering and exposed. In parallel, German engineers turned to unguided rockets. The Werfer Granit 21, or WGR-21, was a 21-centimeter rocket launched from simple tubes mounted under fighter wings. The warhead packed enormous explosive force. A single direct hit would obliterate a B-17. But rockets had no guidance. Their ballistic path was clumsy. They had to be launched from 800 to 1,000 yards far outside the effective range of the bomber's machine guns. The hit rate was dismal, but visually devastating. Trails of smoke curled across the sky as giant projectiles arced toward the formations. Even without scoring a kill, they scattered formations, forced pilots to swerve, disrupted bomb runs, and frayed nerves. They were weapons of psychological warfare. As the air war escalated, so did the size of the bombing force. By spring 1943, the 8th Air Force had swelled to include 16 groups of B-17s and 4 groups of B-24 Liberators. Missions now launched with 100 to 200 bombers, enough to darken the sky over England. The foundational 18 to 21 plane formation evolved into something grander, the combat wing formation. 3 groups, each flying in combat box formation, were now combined into a single wing, a flying fortress times 3. The 54-plane wing formation was stacked both vertically and horizontally. The lead group in the center, the high group above and to one side, the low group below, and to the opposite side. Together, they filled a chunk of airspace 3,000 feet high, 7,000 feet deep, and 2,000 feet across an airborne city of death. And the firepower? Staggering. 54 B-17Gs, each with 1350 caliber machine guns, gave the wing 702 heavy guns. If a German pilot dared to approach, he knew that dozens of gunners would track him at once. That every 5th bullet was a tracer illuminating the air like fireflies on fire. That within moments, hundreds of rounds per second would slice toward him. From a distance, the formation looked alive, an animal bristling with fire, a creature covered in quills. The Germans gave it a name, the fliegendes Stachelschwein, the flying porcupine. To the men who faced them, the B-17 combat boxes were more than formations. They were obstacles of steel and fire. German fighter pilots began calling them fliegendes Stachelschwein, the flying porcupine. The name wasn't poetic, it was literal. From a distance, the tight formations bristled with machine guns, each one spitting tracers in every direction, creating a sphere of death no attacker could penetrate without risk. Oberleutnant Heinz Knoke, a Luftwaffe ace with 33 confirmed victories, recorded the experience in his combat diary. "Attacking the American bombers is like flying into a wall of fire," he wrote. "The tracers come from every direction. You pick your target, line up for the attack, and suddenly the air around you fills with red tracers. You fire your guns, try to get hits on the bomber, and then you dive away praying that nothing vital was hit." These weren't exaggerations. They were daily truths. Major Anton Haeckel, a veteran pilot with 192 confirmed victories, laid out the tactical dilemma even more clearly. Attacking from the rear meant flying a long, exposed approach. From 1,000 meters down to 400 meters, the bomber gunners could fire, but the German pilot using shorter-range weapons could not. The American 50 caliber Brownings outranged the standard Luftwaffe armament. The only advantage lay in the head-on attack, where the extreme closing speed gave bombers less time to fire, but demanded split-second reflexes and nerves of steel. There was one glaring weakness in the American design, however, one that no amount of firepower could correct: rigidity. The combat box required absolute formation discipline. Every bomber had to fly straight and level, holding formation despite flak bursts or fighter attacks. If one aircraft broke rank to take evasive action, it would not only become isolated, it would collapse the overlapping fire coverage of the entire squadron. And so they held formation, always, even when flying into a hailstorm. The German flak arm, a vast machine of industrialized destruction, exploited this perfectly. Over 1 million personnel manned the batteries. Their signature weapon was the feared 8.8 centimeter flak gun, which hurled an 8.8 kilogram explosive shell high into the thin blue air, reaching up to 30,000 feet. These guns weren't aimed at individual aircraft. They were aimed at where the formation would be in 30 seconds. Then, they filled that space with detonations. Flak accounted for 40% of all wounds sustained by 8th Air Force crews, a higher toll than even fighter attacks. Shrapnel shredded aluminum and flesh with equal ease. Pilots held course, holding position even as explosions bloomed around them like black flowers. It was a test of courage and doctrine alike. That doctrine was pushed to the limit during the legendary deep penetration missions of August and October 1943. These operations took the bombers deep into the heart of Germany. Beyond the range of escort fighters, they would rise or fall on formation discipline and firepower alone. On August 17, 1943, exactly 1 year after the 8th Air Force flew its first combat mission, it launched its most ambitious bombing operation to date, a double strike against two critical targets, the Messerschmitt factory at Regensburg and the ball-bearing plants at Schweinfurt. In total, 376 B-17s took to the air. Curtis LeMay, now promoted to command the 3rd Air Division, personally led the Regensburg Force 146 B-17s drawn from 7 bomb groups. Their mission was to hit the Messerschmitt plant and then continue south across the Alps to airfields in North Africa. The second wave, 230 B-17s from 9 bomb groups, would strike Schweinfurt, then return to England. It was a brilliant plan on paper. But the skies had other ideas. The mission started badly. Dense fog blanketed English airfields, delaying takeoff. The carefully choreographed timing between the two forces unraveled. What was supposed to be a 30-minute separation stretched into 3 hours. The entire tactical rhythm collapsed. Meanwhile, German radar tracked both bomber streams from the moment they lifted off. With the delay, Luftwaffe fighter groups had time to land, refuel, rearm, and strike again. The Regensburg force, flying without fighter escort, encountered swarms of Bf-109s and Fw-190s almost immediately after crossing the Dutch coast. They came in waves. First, the head-on attacks, 4 fighters abreast hurtling straight toward the lead elements, their guns already flashing. Tracers cut the sky like red wire. Explosions lit the edges of the formation. Gunners returned fire, tearing into the attackers with streams of lead. Planes went down, German and American alike. But the bombers flew on. They had to. There was no turning back. Not in this formation, not on this mission. At Regensburg, the bombing was precise. The Messerschmitt factory was struck hard, its assembly halls and production lines engulfed in fire. But the victory came at a terrible cost. 24 B-17s never returned. Over at Schweinfurt, fate was even crueler. Delayed for hours by fog and confusion, the second force arrived to find German fighters that had already attacked the Regensburg stream, landed, rearmed, and launched again. Out of the 183 B-17s that reached the target, 36 were shot down. By day's end, 60 bombers and roughly 600 crewmen were lost. 1 in 5 of those who took off. Yet the combat box had done exactly what LeMay designed it to do. A U.S. Army Air Force's survey after the mission confirmed that over half of all bombers lost had fallen out of formation. Those crippled by flak, engine failure, or crew error were easy prey. Once a bomber dropped away from the interlocking fire of its neighbors, its life expectancy shrank to 5 minutes. But those that held position had a fighting chance. Their collective fire forced German pilots to break off sooner, spoiled their aim, and sometimes sent them down in flames. The day proved both the promise and the limits of the formation. The combat box could fight its way to any target in Germany and hurt its attackers badly, but without fighter escort, the losses were unsustainable, and in August 1943, no true long-range escort existed. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt could match the Luftwaffe in a dogfight, but its range was pitiful. On internal fuel, it could escort bombers only 125 miles from base. The new 75-gallon drop tanks added that month extended range to 230 miles. The 108-gallon tanks introduced in September pushed it to 275 miles, enough to cover northern France and the Low Countries, not enough to protect missions deep into Germany. So while engineers raced to create a fighter that could go the distance, the 8th Air Force kept refining its defensive geometry. In September 1943, a new 36-plane group formation was tested. It doubled the number of 3 plane elements in each squadron and aligned all 3 aircraft in each element at the same altitude, reducing collision risk and tightening the overall box. The result was a more compact pattern, easier to hold, more accurate in bombing, and even deadlier to approach. By the end of the year, commanders could choose the 21-plane compact box for smaller raids, the 36-plane group for precision, or the 54-plane wing for sheer firepower. Then came October 14, 1943, the day the skies turned black. The 8th Air Force returned to Schweinfurt for a second strike on the ball-bearing plants, an operation that would enter history as Black Thursday. That morning, 291 B-17s rose from bases across East Anglia. The weather was abysmal. Forming up took too long. Commanders nearly called it off, but the target was too important. Schweinfurt's ball bearings were the hinges of the German war machine. Only half the expected P-47 escorts made rendezvous. Near Aachen, the Thunderbolts waggled their wings in the traditional farewell gesture and turned home. Fuel spent. The bombers flew on alone. Moments later, the Luftwaffe descended. German controllers had tracked them from takeoff. Every fighter unit in Western Germany was scrambled. More than 300 fighters attacked in waves. Bf-109s and FWWII came 3 and 4 abreast, head-on, closing at nearly 500 miles per hour. The air lit up with tracers and explosions. Behind them, twin-engine fighters launched WWII rockets from 1,000 yards, forcing formations to scatter as pilots jerked their controls in panic. The carefully built combat boxes unraveled. The mutual fields of fire broke apart. That was exactly what the Luftwaffe had planned. They no longer wasted effort on the whole stream. They targeted individual groups, smashing each with overwhelming force. Damaged bombers fell away and were immediately set upon by fighters. German pilots, flying from airfields within 50 miles of the route, could land, rearm, refuel in 20 minutes, and take off again to strike the same formation twice, sometimes 3 times, in a single morning. By the time the remnants of the force reached Schweinfurt, 28 bombers were already gone. The 305th Bomb Group, once commanded by Curtis LeMay, flew that day in the lowest, most exposed position of the combat wing formation. They bore the worst of it. German fighters descended on them again and again, exploiting the vulnerability from below. When the bombers finally turned for home, 13 aircraft from the 305th were missing the highest losses of any group that day. 130 men from LeMay's old unit were killed, captured, or simply vanished into the flak-filled sky. Yet even amid the chaos, the bombing was deadly accurate. Post-strike reconnaissance photos revealed that Schweinfurt's ball-bearing plants had taken serious damage. Craters pockmarked the factories. Fires raged in key production halls. Machines lay shattered. The mission had achieved its goal, but the cost was almost unbearable. Of the 291 B-17s that launched that morning, 60 were shot down outright. Another 17 returned so torn apart they had to be scrapped. 121 more limped home, trailing smoke, wings holed, hydraulic systems gone, glass shattered, engines coughing black oil. Over 26% of the force had been lost or rendered unflyable. Aircrew losses mirrored the destruction. Out of 2,900 men, 650 were gone, killed, captured, or missing. That was 22% of all crews. The math became undeniable. At that rate, no one could survive a full 25-mission tour. It was a slow march to a death that no formation could entirely prevent. One of those men was Staff Sergeant Harold Monroe Graham, a ball turret gunner in the 305th. He had already flown 27 missions, an achievement that placed him on the edge of statistical impossibility. The night before the raid, he wrote a letter home. His family would later preserve it. We all know what we're facing tomorrow. Schweinfurt is the toughest target in Germany, but the formation will protect us as much as anything can. If we stay together, if we hold the box no matter what happens, some of us will make it through. The formation gives us that chance. The next day, Graham's bomber was hit over Schweinfurt. Multiple shells tore through the fuselage. Flames engulfed the aircraft. It entered a spin. Witnesses saw only 3 parachutes emerge. Graham was not among them. He was 22 years old. After-action analysis repeated a by-now familiar conclusion. Discipline saved lives. Bombers that held tight formation had better than a 50% chance of returning home. Those that fell away had almost none. The overlapping fire zones of the combat box shot down attackers, damaged others, and most crucially, forced the Luftwaffe to break off early. The system worked, but it could not overcome the sheer weight of numbers, not alone. The formations had done their job, but it was not enough, not without escort. Black Thursday became a turning point. It forced a fundamental re-evaluation of the U.S. strategy. Daylight bombing without fighter escort was no longer sustainable. High command acknowledged what every crewman already knew. You could not expect men to survive when every mission carried a 1 in 5 chance of death. For the rest of 1943, the 8th Air Force restricted itself to targets within fighter range. The grand idea of penetrating deep into Germany's industrial core was temporarily shelved. But this was not surrender. It was a necessary pause time to bring new tools to the fight. That tool arrived in late 1943, the North American P-51B Mustang. Sleek, fast, and agile, it was powered by a Packard-built Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, a fusion of American manufacturing and British engineering genius. With drop tanks, the P-51B had a combat radius exceeding 650 miles. It could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. And it wasn't just long-legged, it was lethal. At the altitudes where bombers and Luftwaffe fighters battled 30,000 feet, the Mustang could match or exceed the performance of both the Bf-109 and the FW-190. When Mustang-equipped fighter groups began flying escort missions in February 1944, the balance of power in the skies shifted. No longer would bombers fly alone into hell. The combat box lived on, but its role began to change. It was no longer a desperate wall of self-defense. With fighters covering the skies around them, bombers could shift focus from survival to precision. The formations remained still, flying in disciplined geometric patterns, but now their main function was to concentrate bomb loads, not merely to survive. The Fortress still flew, but now it flew with a sword at its side. Tight formations did more than protect bombers. They turned destruction into science. Bomb loads fell in compact clusters, hammering targets with devastating accuracy. As the Luftwaffe's grip on the skies loosened throughout 1944, flak replaced fighters as the primary threat. The massive 54-plane combat wings, once necessary to fend off swarms of German interceptors, gave way to the more practical 36-plane group formation. It was compact, easier to maintain, and still deadly. From May 1944 onward, it became the standard for most missions. By February 1944, when the 8th Air Force returned to Schweinfurt during the famous Big Week operations, the landscape of air warfare had changed completely. Now, long-range P-51 Mustangs escorted the B-17s from takeoff to target and back again. The B-17G, bristling with 13 machine guns, was the most heavily armed bomber in the world. The combat box formation, forged in fire over 2 years of brutal combat, had been sharpened, refined, perfected, and most importantly, the Luftwaffe was crumbling. The relentless American strategy of attrition was taking effect. German fighter squadrons were losing pilots faster than they could be replaced. What had nearly been a failure in late 1943 was now turning into success. By D-Day, June 6, 1944, Allied air power had achieved total dominance over Europe. German fighters were no longer the ruling predators of the sky. They had become scattered survivors. B-17 formations flew across Germany with a confidence that would have been unimaginable just months earlier. Loss rates plummeted from 20% in October 1943 to 3 to 5% by mid-1944. These were sustainable numbers, and the psychological shift was just as powerful as the strategic one. Where once rookie crews arrived to find silence and empty bunks, they now saw veterans who had survived, men who had completed 25 missions and lived to tell about it. It meant everything. The effectiveness of the combat box wasn't theoretical, it was proven in numbers. Of the 12,731 B-17s built during the war, 4,735 were lost in combat, a grim 37% loss rate. But buried within that number was a powerful truth. Bombers that held formation survived far more often than those that didn't. A B-17 that fell out of formation due to damage, disorientation, or fear had a survival rate of around 20%. Most were destroyed within minutes, but those that stayed in the box, even on the worst days, they had a better than 50% chance of making it home. It was discipline that saved lives. The box was brutal, but it worked. Technical Sergeant Albert Brown, a radio operator with the 305th, captured the spirit in a letter home later preserved at the National Air Force Museum. The formation is everything. You see a bomber fall out, and you know he's done for. The fighters swarm him like sharks around blood in the water. But if you stay in the box, if you hold your position no matter what, the other bombers protect you with their guns and you protect them with yours. It's the only way any of us survive. We depend on each other absolutely. That's what gets you through. Knowing you're not alone. That if you do your job and stay in position, the formation will protect you as much as anything can in this war. The costs, however, were staggering. The 8th Air Force suffered 54,000 casualties during the strategic bombing campaign. Of those, 26,000 were killed in action and 28,000 taken prisoner. To put that in context, more airmen died in the skies over Europe than the entire U.S. Marine Corps lost in the Pacific. The worst of it came in the second half of 1943, when missions launched deep into Germany without sufficient fighter escort, and the box, no matter how well flown, simply couldn't hold back the tide alone. And yet, the courage endured. The willingness to climb aboard a bomber, knowing the odds to fly into flak and fire, to hold position when every instinct screamed to dive and run, that courage cannot be overstated. The numbers tell the rest. A 54-plane wing of WWIIs mounted more than 700 heavy machine guns, each one capable of firing 750 rounds per minute, reaching targets at 3,500 feet. These guns weren't placed randomly. They were arranged in three-dimensional space-overlapping arcs, interlocking zones of protection. A German fighter pilot trying to break into that fortress had to fly through a hurricane of lead for several seconds. Most couldn't. Some never tried twice. Even Luftwaffe combat analysis confirmed it. Attacking intact formations was extraordinarily difficult and dangerous. Defensive fire forced attackers to break early, ruined their aim, and often shot them down outright. The combat box was more than a tactic, it was a reflection of American warfare itself. It was engineered, not improvised. It married mass production with tactical innovation, blending machinery, mathematics, and manpower into something both brutal and beautiful. Other nations might have given up on daylight bombing when the cost became clear. The Americans didn't. They adapted, they refined, they endured, they approached the problem not with improvisation or desperation, but with method. They analyzed, they charted lost patterns, examined what worked and what didn't. They tested, refined, recalculated. Different formations were flown, gun angles plotted, tactics reworked. This wasn't just a response, it was a system. But the solution required more than just tactics. It demanded an industrial miracle. The United States had to produce thousands of B-17 flying fortresses, each one a marvel of steel and fire, carrying 13 heavy machine guns and over 7,500 rounds of ammunition. To build more than 12,000 bombers meant mobilizing millions of man-hours, coordinating production across dozens of states, thousands of factories, countless supply chains. And building the planes was only half the challenge. You had to fill those cockpits and turrets with men who could fly, navigate, shoot, and survive as a coordinated unit. It required an entire training infrastructure capable of turning farm boys and city kids into pilots, navigators, bombardiers, engineers, gunners. These weren't just individuals. They had to become teams capable of trusting each other with their lives. Getting them trained, transported across oceans, assigned to squadrons, integrated into mission planning, that logistical architecture was as complex as any combat scenario. The combat box, in this light, was not just a tactical solution. It was a symbol, a manifestation of American industrial might and organizational genius, a flying expression of how a democracy at war could scale complexity into power. The Germans began the war with superior pilots, more experience, and the advantage of fighting over their own skies. But they could not match American mass production or the sheer scale of coordinated warfare. The combat box embodied this asymmetry. Only a nation that could build hundreds of bombers a month and train thousands of aircrew could make such a strategy viable. When Curtis LeMay first tested the concept over Lille on December 6, 1942, it was just an idea, a solution born on a chalkboard and tested in the sky. He had measured the gaps in earlier formations, calculated gun arcs, and arranged aircraft positions to create a wall of interlocking fire. By May 1945, the war was over. In less than 3 years, the combat box had gone from experiment to standard doctrine. It was the blueprint. Over 12,000 B-17s flew missions in variations of that design. Together, they dropped over 640,000 tons of bombs on German targets, crippling factories, oil refineries, supply lines, transport hubs, and military infrastructure. They didn't just hit targets, they broke the Luftwaffe. They forced Germany into a battle of attrition it couldn't win. They proved that daylight precision bombing, a concept many considered suicidal, could, with the right tactics, firepower, and courage, succeed. And the men who flew those missions, they knew the odds. Before every raid, intelligence officers briefed them on loss rates. They didn't fly blind. They saw the empty bunks, heard the silence where friends used to joke. They attended funerals in quiet chapels and folded flags handed to families. They knew completing 25 missions required not just skill and nerve, but luck, measured in seconds. So they developed rituals. Some wrote letters home in case they didn't return. Others prayed. Some clutched lucky coins, Bibles, rabbit feet, photos of wives. They pulled on flight suits with mechanical care, checked guns, oxygen lines, heated boots, climbed into their aircraft in silence. They didn't swagger. They didn't pretend to be heroes. They were ordinary men doing an extraordinary job, knowing exactly what it might cost. The true significance of the combat box reaches far beyond its tactical success. It became a symbol of doctrine, of conviction, of national character. At its core, it represented a radical commitment to a strategy that few believed could work. Daylight precision bombing over the most heavily defended targets in Europe. While the RAF had already shifted to nighttime raids after suffering devastating losses, the U.S. Army Air Forces refused to follow. They held fast to the belief that destroying precise industrial targets, factories, refineries, assembly plants, was not only possible, but essential to ending the war. And that level of precision, it required daylight. The combat box was what made that belief possible. It turned a near-suicidal doctrine into an operational reality. By concentrating defensive firepower across dozens of bombers flying in perfect synchronization, it gave American crews a fighting chance. It was a steel web of guns and courage, a formation that German fighters could not easily overwhelm, no matter how many came at once. But flying in that formation, that was another story entirely. 8 to 10 hours in the sky, altitudes where the temperature dropped to 40 degrees below zero. No pressurization, just oxygen masks, electrically heated suits, and the hope they wouldn't fail. Engines roared, turrets spun, tracers sliced the thin air. Every minute, a new threat fighter's flak, malfunction, fear, and still they held the line. Thousands of crews endured this, not once, but 25 times or more. Some, incredibly, volunteered to keep flying after their tours were done. Why? Because they believed in what they were doing. They believed that precision bombing could shorten the war, save lives on the ground, and bring freedom closer. In the annals of aerial warfare, few tactical innovations demanded more from the men who carried them out. The combat box didn't just ask for skill, it asked for everything. These weren't seasoned veterans. The average age of the bomber crewman was 23. Many came from farms, small towns, factory jobs, classrooms. They were thrust into the cockpit, handed a flak vest and a prayer, and told to fly in formation through a sky filled with death. And they did. Day after day, mission after mission, they stared down odds that would have broken seasoned soldiers. And they didn't flinch because they believed. They believed in the mission. They believed they were defending something greater than themselves, their families, their country, the idea of a freedom. That belief carried them through burned-out engines, shredded wings, blood on the fuselage, the unbearable loss of friends mid-flight. Many of them survived the war, but not all left it behind. Psychological scars followed them home. Some spoke of what they had seen. Many did not. But all carried within them the unshakable knowledge that they had stood together in the face of overwhelming fire and had held. The combat box remains one of the most remarkable achievements in the history of modern warfare, not because it relied on brute force, but because it fused technology, organization, and raw human courage into something greater than the sum of its parts. It was a uniquely American answer to a seemingly impossible problem. It reflected the full spectrum of American power industrial capacity, engineering innovation, training infrastructure, and above all, the spirit of young men who refused to give up. They didn't fly alone. They flew in formation, always,